You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. As Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. You can make this possible. The mass shooting at a supermarket in Boulder, Colorado yesterday took place less than a week after 8 people were killed in a series of attacks at spas in Atlanta. They are also among at least 7 mass shootings in the past week across the U.S., including 3 incidents on Saturday alone. The National Medical Association is calling gun violence a public health emergency and is calling for action by lawmakers. Joining me now is Dr. Roger Mitchell, a forensic pathologist and Washington, D.C.'s chief medical examiner. He also chairs the National Medical Association's Gun Violence Task Force. All right, Doc, glad to have you here on Roland Martin Unfiltered.
No, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Dr. Mitchell, 10 people.
Okay.
Yeah, I hear you just fine. 10 people dead yesterday in Boulder, Colorado. And of course, we see what took place, 8 dead last week in Atlanta. And there was a hearing today on Capitol Hill and just more excuses from Republican senators on how to deal with this issue.
Yeah, you know, it should not have excuses. We're not making excuses to try to save lives from COVID-19. And recently we've stopped making excuses about saving lives from the opioid crisis. But when it comes to gun violence, firearm violence, we find a way to make excuses to save lives in this country. And it's quite frankly, it's appalling.
And again, it's a whole lot of same old, same old. And listening to folks, you just sit here, I heard the back and forth from various different people, and then of course you have the typical thoughts and prayers. This right here is in the moment I'm going to show President Joe Biden speaking, also Senator Cory Booker speaking passionately about this issue. But again, what was problematic is listening to Republicans act as if this is no big deal. Let's just focus on getting the hands out of the criminals. That's the only people who have a problem. This guy in Boulder, Colorado, bought the AR-15 just last week.
Yeah, when we're talking about what really needs to happen, we know that 40% of all of our guns in the U.S. are sold by private sellers, and it requires no background check. 30% of illegal guns are connected to gun shows or other legal means of purchase. There's a real need for us to change the narrative surrounding gun control and the gun violence question. The reality of it is that 32,000 firearm-related deaths in the U.S. Annually. And it comes up when these active shooters happen. It comes up when Colorado happens and Atlanta happens. But, just this weekend, we had 20 people shot and 4 people dead in Chicago. 13 people shot and I think 3 people dead in Chicago just on Monday. I mean, we're talking about issue after issue surrounding gun violence, but nobody wants to call it a public health crisis and put the necessary resources and mandates in place.
Doc, what do you make when you have people like Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas say this?
There's been extended, systematic attacks on our police and law enforcement professionals for years, calling them racist and bigoted and prejudiced, demanding that they be defunded and replaced with social workers. When you condemn the police, when you make it harder to do their job, you shouldn't be surprised that criminals take advantage of the opportunities that follow, and that crime rises, and that in particular, violent crime rises. Likewise, some on the left like to complain about mass incarceration.
Doc, real interesting. A cop was killed yesterday. So this whole idea, that calls for dealing with racism in police departments, that's the blame for this white guy yesterday killing 10 people in Boulder, Colorado.
He's conflating the issue. I mean, he's conflating the issue because there's this notion that you have to be anti-police to be pro-life and pro-gun control, and that's not true. I mean, we know we know that the issue that happened in Boulder, Colorado, has nothing, absolutely nothing to do with the institutional and structural racism that is felt by our community that calls for us to call for better policing in our community. We need better policing in our community, and we need proper gun control measures to stop the active shooter or to bring the active shooter in a place where we can control their access to guns. It's a both and construct.
Here's the sheer arrogance of another Republican, Senator Ted Cruz of Texas.
And every time there's a shooting, we play this ridiculous theater where this committee gets together and proposes a bunch of laws that would do nothing to stop these murders. Senator from Connecticut just said the folks on the other side of the aisle have no solutions. Well, the senator from Connecticut knows that is false. And he knows that's false because Senator Grassley and I together introduced legislation, Grassley-Cruz, targeted at violent criminals, targeted at felons, targeted at fugitives, targeted at those with serious mental disease, to stop them from getting firearms, to put them in prison when they try to illegally buy guns. What happens in this committee after every mass shooting is Democrats propose taking away guns from law-abiding citizens because that's their political objective. But what they propose, not only does it not reduce crime, it makes it worse. And every time there's a shooting, we play this ridiculous...
Okay, Ted, what should we do? What should we do?
I laugh every time I hear this notion of we're trying to take away, there's people trying to take away guns. Nobody's talking about anyone trying to take away cars when you need proper licensing to drive a vehicle, when you need to pass tests to drive a vehicle, when you have to have put yourself in position to renew your license. And that those vehicles kill people. And that's the reason why we put those things in place. It's the same thing with seatbelts and helmets. We're not talking about taking away guns. We're talking about creating an environment where the most vulnerable of our population does not have access to guns, and the most vulnerable population are safe from guns. The perpetuation of being tough on crime is just dog whistle for institutional and structural racism. And so, the National Medical Association, we're clear on that we need a COVID-like response to gun violence in this country with adequate research and adequate resources and adequate programs in education, economics, and housing for communities of color. Yes, the active shooter is much different than the smoldering violence that we see in Black communities. There is no doubt about that. And we know how to treat them both.
President Joe Biden also spoke out today. Here's what he had to say.
After every mass shooting is Democrats
less than a week after the horrific murders of
from law-abiding citizens
and the assault on the AAPI community in Georgia. While the flag was still flying half-staff for the tragedy, another American city has been scarred by gun violence and the resulting trauma. And the state, I even hate to say it because we're saying it so often, my heart goes out. Our hearts go out for the survivors, who had to flee for their lives and who hid, terrified, unsure if they would ever see their families again, their friends again. At this moment, a great deal remains unknown, but 3 things are certain. First, 10 lives have been lost and more families have been shattered by gun violence in the state of Colorado. And Jill and I are devastated, and the feeling, I just can't imagine how the families are feeling, the victims whose futures were stolen from them, from their families, from their loved ones. I commend the exceptional bravery of Officer Eric Talley, and I send my deepest condolences to his family, his close family and 7 children. When he pinned on that badge yesterday morning, he didn't know what the day would bring. But when the moment the act came, Officer Tully did not hesitate in his duty, making the ultimate sacrifice in his effort to save lives. That's a definition of an American hero. I don't need to wait another minute, let alone an hour, to take common sense steps that will save the lives in the future, and to urge my colleagues in the House and Senate to act. We can ban assault weapons and high-capacity magazines in this country once again. We can close the loopholes in our background check system, including the Charleston loophole. The United States Senate, I hope some are listening, should immediately pass the 2 House-passed bills that close loopholes in the background check system. These are bills that
don't understand why that's somehow controversial.
Yeah, and you know, it's very simple. We know that here in D.C., the majority of the guns come from Virginia, and they also come from Florida, and there's some areas that come from Alabama, and we know that they're legally bought, and then they're brought into this city. And most of the urban centers, that's how there's gun trafficking into our urban centers that are taking advantage of the gun show loopholes to be able to purchase multiple weapons and then be able to sell them on an underground market. That flow of guns into our community must stop. I'm a minister, Roland. I do funerals, and as a forensic pathologist, and just as a correction, I'm the former chief medical examiner of DC and now the chair of pathology for Howard University. And I've seen my share of families that are devastated. And so there's enough talk about we give our condolences, because we do. We need to have real concrete action if we're going to stop this health crisis and treat it as such.
Doc Mitchell, we surely appreciate it. Thank you so very much for joining us.
God bless.
All right, folks, back to our Roland Martin Unfiltered video in just one moment.
It's time to be smart. When we control our institutions, we win. This is the most important news show on television of any racial background. Y'all put $2, $3, $4, $5, $10, $15, $20, $30 on this and keep this going. What you've done, Roland, since this crisis came out in full bloom. Anybody watching this, tell your friends. Go back and look at the last 2 weeks, especially of Roland Martin Unfiltered. I mean, hell, go back and look at the last 2 days. You've had sitting United States senators today, Klobuchar and Harris. Whatever you have that you can bring to Roland Martin Unfiltered to support it, please do, because this information may literally save your life.
Watch Roland Martin Unfiltered daily at 6 p.m. Eastern on YouTube, Facebook, or Periscope, or go to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered Daily Digital Show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Our goal is to get 20,000 of our fans contributing $50 each for the whole year. You can make this possible. RolandMartinUnfiltered.com.